So good afternoon, everyone. I'm here to talk about our ongoing work on building a roadmap for OCaml on Windows. We have dubbed this project First Class Windows. So one might ask why? Why should we do this? So I'm going to talk a little bit about our motivations. So let's look at some numbers first. You can see in the graph, so this is a graph of operating systems on PC usage on operating systems. And as you can see, over 65% of PCs run Windows, number one. And surprisingly, it is true for developers as well. So this is from the latest 2024 Stack Overflow survey. And as you can see, almost 60% people use Windows as their primary operating system. And this is a multiple option question. So if you can see a little bit further down, there are also people who use Windows subsystem for Linux as their primary operating system. So which puts us in a place where more than 60% users here as well are on Windows. And a bigger surprise is that a lot of OCaml enthusiasts also use Windows. I might be reading a bit much into this, but this is the stats from the OCaml.org plausible site, which shows us that 30% almost of users who visit OCaml.org are on Windows machines. Right? So here are some numbers. Let me talk a little bit about an anecdotal example that we went through as well. So last year, around the same time, at an open source conference in India called IndiaForce, I was running an OCaml workshop, introductory OCaml workshop, which had a lot of participants, along with Casey and a few other folks. And surprisingly, more than 50% of the participants had Windows machines at a free and open source software conference. And we really had a hard time trying to set up OCaml on their machines. And finally, we had to resort to using online compilers like Replit and whatnot. Of course, this was pre-OPAM, but that was when I started thinking hard about this problem of how we can make the experience of OCaml on Windows better. Right. So what's the big deal? OCaml has been running on Windows since forever, right? I'm sure people are going to ask that question. And David has demonstrated that, I think this was during the 25 years of OCaml discussion, that the very first version of the OCaml compiler still runs on Windows with very little patching. So what's the big deal? So now that, the compiler has been running on Windows for a long time, the next step that we want to think about is how can we make writing software on Windows and for Windows easier for developers. So to that end, what we're thinking about is how to get the platform and ecosystem working well on Windows. So that's essentially it. Right? So there are many ways to get there. So right now we are at a point where we have OPAM working on Windows. David and the other OPAM maintainers will be talking about it later today. But we want to get to a point where the developer experience on Windows is on par with other tier 1 platforms like Linux or Mac. So there are many ways to go about it. Excuse my poorly drawn diagram. But what essentially we are trying to do here is we are trying to find that path that takes us there, right? Which is what we aim to achieve with coming up with this roadmap. So how do we go about it? There are a few things that we have done and we have been doing. We did a user survey to understand what people find challenging. We also did a survey of other languages to see what it is like on other ecosystems. We have been looking at the current state of the OCaml ecosystem on Windows. And we have also started a working group for people interested in the intersection of OCaml and Windows. I'll be talking about it further towards the end. So before we dive in, right? So we had the OCaml compiler working on Windows since forever. We have OPAM working on Windows recently, after the OPAM 2.2 release. But even before the OPAM 2.2 release, there have been bridges that have helped us to use OCaml on Windows. So these are essentially those, right? So DiskUV DKML is an open source set of software that supports development on C and OCaml. That was the recommended way to use OCaml on Windows pre-OPAM 2.2. There's also this package manager SE that a lot of recent folks use, which fully supports OCaml and which also fully supports Windows. And of course, WSL, Windows Subsystem for Linux, lets you use OCaml from a Linux distribution from within Windows. And there is a small but thriving group that uses cross-compilation as a solution for running their OCaml stuff on Windows. And of course, Docker is another way that we can use OCaml on Windows. But now we have OPAM that works on Windows. So the OCaml.org website is freshly updated to recommend installing OPAM on Windows. So this is all you need, right? It's just 2 lines, and you have OCaml up and running on Windows. So moving on, what we did with the user survey. So this was essentially an exercise to try and understand what challenges that users face. And the good thing was that we got responses from a good mix of experienced users as well as beginners and users from different viewpoints, basically. Some quick stats. At least 30% of developers target Windows. They may or may not develop on Windows, but they target developing their applications on Windows. And 75% of participants reported trouble with installation. This was pre-OPAM 2.2, so I'm hoping a lot of this is fixed with OPAM 2.2 release. And 90% of participants thought the developer experience could be improved. And also 50% of participants reported that they have had a better time using other languages on Windows when they compare it with OCaml. We'll be talking about other languages in a little bit, but some quick highlights from the survey responses is that so one of the things that was mentioned in most of the response was that there isn't a blessed path that is recommended to install OCaml on Windows. And the solution is that is now fixed with OPAM 2.2. There are professors, I know some of them who are sitting in this room, who teach OCaml courses, and they have had to use workarounds for letting their students who use Windows to use OCaml. And some of those workarounds are asking them to use WSL or Docker. I mean, both come with their own caveats. I'm not going to get too much into it. But again, the bottom line is that OPAM 2.2 should fix this. Another thing that was highlighted was that people who are shipping products for Windows face some challenges when they're using third-party dependencies, because it's straightforward to build something that only depends on the compiler, but not so much if you have other libraries that you want to include in your builds. Cross-compilation could be a possible solution here. All right, so moving on to survey of other languages. So this was an experiment that we did to assess what the developer experience is like on Windows. So this includes a bunch of languages: Rust, Python, C, Haskell, Go, and F#. The idea here is to spot some interesting patterns and try to reuse it, and also try to avoid things that other people had difficulties with. So that's basically it. And we wanted to focus on things we have had difficulty with OCaml on Windows when we tried to use it ourselves, which is setup time, difficulty of setting up a developer environment from scratch, and handling external dependencies. So this is how we went about it. So we first go to the website of the language and try to install it. We run a Hello World program. And then we try to install the OCaml logo from the OCaml.org website. And then once it is in the system, we try to display it using SDL2. Fairly simple experiment that we repeated on all of the languages that was mentioned before. And this was our experience. It was fairly trivial with Python and F#, and I think with F#, it's sort of expected because it's part of the .NET ecosystem. It was really straightforward with C and Rust as well. And it was a bit non-trivial with Haskell, where we had some difficulty setting up the SDL2 bindings. And we failed doing this in Go. It's possibly the case that we lack the Go foo to get this up and running. But I think that's the point of this experiment. We are essentially beginners who are trying to learn a new language. What is the experience like? So this was it. Some insights. All the other languages that we tried to install were easier to install and also faster to install. We are, of course, in a better place with OPAM 2.2. And I also know that we haven't spent a lot of time looking at things like benchmarks and speeds because we wanted to get it up and running first. And now that we have it up and running, that's possibly coming next. The good thing is, though, we are in a better place with respect to external deps because what we observed was it was all over the place on other languages. It was either left to the user or it was left to the package manager, like in the case of Rust or in the case of Python. Of course, there's still work to do with respect to defects on Windows and cross-compilation. So there is that. So the next thing is platform tools. How do they fare right now? We tried to basically use all the platform tools and try to also build them. The good thing is most of them are usable on Windows out of the box. Right? So the first column, OPAM install, works would mean that you should be able to install it now on your Windows system and be able to use it. The thing is, though, not a lot of them have continuous integration that tests them on Windows. So the thing here might be that OCaml CI doesn't support Windows yet, but the good thing is we have set up OCaml plus GitHub Actions workflow that is fairly straightforward to set up a Windows CI for. So there's still work to do, bottom line. This is a short survey of the ecosystem. There are some packages that don't build on Windows yet. And there are two things here, right? Either the package owner or the package maintainer may choose to never support Windows, which is totally fine. And this information has to be on OPAM repository somehow so that we have our expectations right. The second case is that there are possibly some failures that need to be fixed. And we were in a similar place for multicore a couple of years ago. There were lots of packages that needed patches for them to work on OCaml 5.0. And Kate did a lot of work with it, with OPAM health check runs and trying to identify and fix failures and making releases, etc., etc. Similar OPAM health check run for Windows could be of use. Right now, the OCurrent ecosystem that forms the core of OPAM Health Check doesn't support Windows. So when we get there, that is a possible solution to kind of expedite this process of getting the ecosystem running on Windows. Right. Yeah, so unavailable libraries is essentially what we talked about earlier. So it would be nice to have OPAM repository indicate that a package is available or not available on Windows. And coming to the case of missing bindings, yeah, bindings for Windows needs attention, and it's sort of a chicken and egg problem here. There are no users, and there are no bindings, and there are no bindings, and there are no users. So we have to break this somehow. Bulk testing of OPAM repository would really help to get the failures on Windows fixed and released. The nice thing about this is OPAM repository now has a check for Windows when you're trying to release a new package. So you're at least aware that your package doesn't build on Windows. So the aim here is that for a developer who's trying to release something on OPAM repository, right, they need not have any Windows knowledge or access to a Windows machine to make sure that something that they're trying to publish works on Windows. So that is what we mean by getting Windows to a tier 1 platform. So we have created a new repository called Papercuts. So if you're having any trouble at all trying to use anything on Windows and you don't know where to report it, please go here and report it. I'm sure one of us will look through it and try to figure out where the issue is coming from. And it would also be nice to have a central place where the issues are reported so that if there are other people who see similar build failures or issues, know that something is up and somebody is also on to fixing it. The way forward, where do we go from here? So we have a mailing list for the Windows working group, and we run meetings every month or so. You can find details about this on discuss.ocaml.org, or you can come find me. I'll tell you how to join this. If you're interested in this, it would be great to join the mailing list, and we aim to keep this going. We have some preliminary information up on this repository, OCaml Windows/roadmap, and this is where we plan to update more results of our work in the coming weeks. And the next step is, of course, to work on actual execution of the roadmap itself. So please consider contributing to this effort if this is something you're interested in. Firstly, test OPAM on Windows, report issues, let us know what is not working. And yeah, if you're interested in contributing on specific things with respect to Windows and OCaml, please come talk to me. And there are also David and Casey around. Come talk to any of us. So with that, I'm happy to take questions.
We have time for 2 or 3 questions.
Thanks. So I'm personally interested in one of the things you mentioned with respect to building binaries of OCaml programs for Windows and then distributing them to users. Is that part of your immediate plans, or maybe is that something that you keep for later? I'm wondering if I should also join the mailing list and so on to learn more about that.
Yeah, you're very welcome to join the mailing list. And this is something we have heard from quite a few people. So I think that should be higher up in the priority to answer your question.
OK, thanks.
Hi, Tim Williams from Bloomberg. I just wondered what the rationale is really for supporting native Windows when there is WSL, and it works so well, and that's what we use at our company, although we do use Windows, of course, on the desktop. And now that WSL supports graphical applications quite well, wouldn't it, given that we do have limited resources compared to, for example, the Python community, wouldn't it make more sense to sort of consolidate on POSIX and Linux support, and and just tell Windows users to use OCaml via WSL? What's the argument against that? Thank you.
That's a good question, and it's good to know that WSL is working well at Bloomberg. But there are a few things with that. So WSL sort of assumes, asking somebody to use OCaml on WSL, you assume that the person knows how to use Unix systems. And which is true for a lot of OCaml developers, but not so much for people who are trying to learn OCaml. They may or may not be familiar with how to use Unix systems. So you're essentially adding one more level of indirection to be able to learn OCaml in the first place. So that is one thing from my point of view. But what we have heard from commercial users of OCaml who ship products that run on Windows is that they expect the product to run natively on Windows and not ask their users to install WSL and then run whatever it is that they're running on Windows. So I'm assuming it works well in a setup like Bloomberg, where it's the same set of people who are going to use it again. But when you don't know who your user is, you're essentially adding a level of barrier if you're asking them to use OCaml on WSL.
That's fair. Thank you.
I propose we take the next question over lunch. And thanks.
Thanks.